Hey everyone, this is episode 2 of Max Reads Coraline. Thank you to everybody who watched the first one, or listened, I should say. I actually found I was let know. Somebody let me know that there's a Coraline video game for the PS2, so I put that on the screen instead this time. It's pretty tedious. It's really it's probably made for, it is made for children, but I still had some fun. I played for about an hour. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now because there's a lot longer of chapters this time around. So without further ado, here's chapters 4 through 6. Chapter 4. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, or almost exactly the same. Around Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's door were blue and red light bulbs that flashed on and off, spelling out words. The lights chasing each other around the door. On and off, around and around. Astounding was followed by a theatrical, and then triumph. It was a sunny, cold day, exactly like the one she'd left. There was a polite noise from behind her. She turned around. Standing on the wall next to her was a large black cat, identical to the large black cat she'd seen in the grounds at home. "Good afternoon," said the cat. Its voice sounded like the voice at the back of Coraline's head, the voice she thought words in, but a man's voice, not a girl's. "Hello," said Coraline. "I saw a cat like you in the garden at home. You must be the other cat." The cat shook its head. "No," it said. "I'm not the other anything. I'm me." It tipped its head on one side. Green eyes glinted. "You people are spread all over the place. Cats, on the other hand, keep ourselves together, if you see what I mean." "I suppose, but if you're the same cat I saw at home, how can you talk?" "Cats don't have shoulders, not like people do," but the cat shrugged in one smooth movement that started at the tip of its tail and ended in a raised movement of its whiskers. "I can talk." "Cats don't talk at home." "No?" said the cat. "No," said Coraline. The cat leapt smoothly from the wall to the grass, near Coraline's feet. It stared up at her. "Well, you're the expert on these things," said the cat dryly. "After all, what would I know? I'm only a cat." It began to walk away, head and tail held high and proud. "Come back," said Coraline. "Please, I'm sorry, I really am." The cat stopped walking and sat down and began to wash itself, thoughtfully, apparently unaware of Coraline's existence. We could be friends, you know," said Coraline. "We could be rare specimens of an exotic breed of African dancing elephants," said the cat. "But we're not. At least," it added cattily after darting a brief look at Coraline, "I'm not." Coraline sighed. "Please, what's your name?" Coraline asked the cat. "Look, I'm Coraline, okay?" The cat yawned slowly, carefully revealing a mouth and tongue of astounding pinkness. "Cats don't have names," it said. "No?" said Coraline. "No," said the cat. "Now, you people have names. That's because you don't know who you are. We know who we are, so we don't need names." There was something irritatingly self-centered about the cat, Coraline decided, as if it were, in its opinion, the only thing in the world or place that could possibly be of any importance. Half of her wanted to be very rude to it. The other half of her wanted to be polite and deferential. The polite half won. "Please, what is this place?" The cat glanced around briefly. "It's here," said the cat. "I can see that. Well, how did you get here?" "Like you did. I walked," said the cat, "like this." Coraline watched as the cat walked slowly across the lawn. It walked behind a tree but didn't come out on the other side. Coraline went over to the tree and looked behind it. The cat was gone. She walked back towards the house. There was another polite noise from behind her. It was the cat. "By the by," it said, "it was sensible of you to bring protection. I'd hang on to it if I were you." "Protection?" "That's what I said," said the cat. "And anyway..." It paused and stared intently at something that wasn't there. Then it went down into a low crouch and moved slowly forward, 2 or 3 steps. It seemed to be stalking an invisible mouse. Abruptly, it turned tail and dashed for the woods. It vanished among the trees. Coraline wondered what the cat had meant. She also wondered whether cats could all talk where she came from, and just chose not to, or whether they could only talk when they were here, wherever here was. She walked down the brick steps to the Mrs. Spink and Forcible's front door. The blue and red lights flashed on and off. The door was open, just slightly. She knocked on it, but her first knock made the door swing open, and Coraline went in. She was in a dark room that smelled of dust and velvet. The door swung shut behind her, and the room was black. Coraline edged forward into a small anteroom. Her face brushed against something soft. It was cloth. She reached up her hand and pushed at the cloth. It parted. She stood blinking on the other side of the velvet curtains in a poorly lit theater. Far away at the edge of the room was a high wooden stage, empty and bare, a dim spotlight shining onto it from above. There were seats between Coraline and the stage, rows and rows of seats. She heard a shuffling noise and a light came towards her, swinging from side to side. When it was closer, she saw the light was coming from a torch being carried in the mouth of a large black Scotty dog, its muzzle gray with age. "Hello," said Coraline. The dog put the torch down on the floor and looked up at her. "Right, let's see your ticket," it said gruffly. "Ticket? That's what I said. Ticket. I haven't got all day." "You can't watch the show without a ticket." Coraline sighed. "I don't have a ticket," she admitted. "Another one of you," said the dog gloomily. "Come in here, bold as anything." "Where's your ticket? Haven't got one. I don't know." It shook its head and then shrugged. "Come on, then." The dog picked up the torch in its mouth and trotted off into the dark. Coraline followed. When it got near to the front of the stage, it stopped and shone the torch onto an empty seat. Coraline sat down and the dog wandered off. As her eyes got used to the darkness, she realized that the other inhabitants of the seats were also dogs. There was a sudden hissing noise from behind the stage. Coraline decided it was the sound of a scratchy old record being put onto a record player. The hissing became the noise of trumpets, and Miss Spink and Miss Forcible came onto the stage. Miss Spink was riding a one-wheeled bicycle and juggling balls. Miss Forcible skipped on behind her, holding a basket of flowers. She scattered the flower petals across the stage as she went. They reached the front of the stage, and Miss Spink leapt nimbly off the unicycle, and the 2 women bowed low. All the dogs thumped their tails and barked enthusiastically. Coraline clapped politely. Then they unbuttoned their fluffy, round coats and opened them, and their coats weren't all that open. Their faces... But their coats weren't all that open. Their faces opened, too, like empty shells, and out of the empty, fluffy, round bodies stepped 2 young women. They were thin and pale, and quite pretty, and had black button eyes. The new Miss Spink was wearing green tights and high brown boots that went most of the way up to her legs. The new Miss Forcible wore a white dress and had flowers in her long yellow hair. Coraline pressed back against her seat. Miss Spink left the stage, and the noise of trumpets squealed as the gramophone needle dug its way into the record and was pulled off. "This is my favorite bit," whispered the little dog in the seat next to her. The other Miss Forcible picked a knife out of the box on the corner of the stage. "Is this a dagger that I see before me?" she asked. "Yes," shouted all the little dogs. "It is." Miss Forcible curtsied, and all the dogs applauded again. Coraline didn't bother clapping this time. Miss Spink came back on. She slapped her thigh, and all the little dogs woofed. "And now," Miss Spink said, "Miriam and I proudly present a new and exciting addendum to our theatrical exposition. Do I see a volunteer?" The little dog next to Coraline nudged her with its front paw. "That's you," it hissed. Coraline stood up and walked up the wooden steps to the stage. "Can I have a big round of applause for the young volunteer?" asked Miss Spink. The dogs woofed and squealed and thumped their tails on velvet seats. "Now, Coraline," said Miss Spink, "what's your name?" "Coraline," said Miss Spink. Said Coraline, I'm sorry. "And we don't know each other now, do we?" Coraline looked at the thin young woman with black button eyes and shook her head slowly. "Now," said the other Miss Spink, "stand over there." She led Coraline over to a board by the side of the stage and put a balloon on top of Coraline's head. Miss Spink walked over to Miss Forcible. She blindfolded Miss Forcible's button eyes with a black scarf and put the knife into her hands. Then she turned her around 3 or 4 times and pointed her at Coraline. Coraline held her breath and squeezed her fingers with 2 tight fists. Miss Forcible threw the knife at the balloon. It popped loudly, and the knife stuck into the board just above Coraline's head and twanged there. Coraline breathed out. The dogs went wild. Miss Spink gave Coraline a very small box of chocolates and thanked her for being such a good sport. Coraline went back to her seat. "You were very good," said the little dog. "Thank you," said Coraline. Mrs. Forcible and Spink began juggling the huge wooden clubs on the stage. Coraline opened the box of chocolates. The little dog looked at them longingly. "Would you like one?" she asked it. "Yes, please," whispered the old dog. "Only not toffee ones. They make me drool." "I thought chocolates weren't very good for dogs," she said, remembering something Miss Forcible had once told her. "Maybe where you come from," whispered the little dog. "Here, it's all we eat." Coraline couldn't see what the chocolates were in the dark. She took an experimental bite of one, which turned out to be coconut. Coraline didn't like coconut. She gave it to the dog. "Thank you," said the dog. "You're welcome," said Coraline. Miss Forcible and Miss Spink were doing some acting. Miss Forcible was sitting on a stepladder and Miss Spink was standing at the bottom. "What's in a name?" asked Miss Forcible. "That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." "How have you got any more chocolates?" said the dog. I'm sorry, this is just like the most confusing sentence I've ever read. And I'm not cutting this out, because if you're listening, you're a true fan. "What's in a name?" asked Miss Forcible. "That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." "Have you got any more chocolates?" said the dog. Coraline gave the dog another chocolate. "I know not how to tell thee who I am," said Miss Spink to Miss Forcible. "This bit finishes soon," whispered the dog. "Then they start folk dancing." "How long does this go on for?" asked Coraline. "The theater." "All the time," said the dog. "Forever and always." "Here," said Coraline. "Keep the chocolates." "Thank you," said the dog. Coraline stood up. "See you soon," said the dog. "Bye," said Coraline. She walked out of the theater and back into the garden. She had to blink her eyes at the daylight. Her other parents were waiting for her in the garden, standing side by side. They were smiling. "Did you have a nice time?" asked the other mother. "It was interesting," said Coraline. The 3 of them walked back up to Coraline's other house together. Coraline's other mother stroked Coraline's hair with her long white fingers. Coraline shook her head. "Don't do that," said Coraline. Her other mother took her hand away. "So," said her other father, "do you like it here?" "I suppose," said Coraline. "It's much more interesting than at home." They went inside. "I'm glad you like it," said Coraline's other mother, "because we'd like to think that this is your home. You can stay here forever and always, if you want to." Said Coraline. She put her hands in her pockets and thought about it. Her fingertips touched the stone that the real Mrs. Spink and Forcible had given her the day before, the stone with the hole in it. "If you want to stay," said her other father, "there's only one little thing we'll have to do so you can stay here forever and always." They went into the kitchen. On a china plate on the kitchen table were a spool of black cotton and a long silver needle, and beside them 2 large black buttons. "I don't think so," said Coraline. "Oh, but we want you to," said her other mother. "We want you to stay, and it's just a little thing. It won't hurt," said her father. Coraline knew that when grown-ups told you something wouldn't hurt, it almost always did. She shook her head. Her other mother smiled brightly, and the hair on her head drifted like plants under the sea. "We only want what's best for you," she said. She put her hand on Coraline's shoulder. Coraline backed away. "I'm going now," said Coraline. She put her hands back in her pockets, her fingers closed around the stone with the hole in it. Her other mother's hand scuttled off Coraline's shoulder like a frightened spider. "If that's what you want," she said. "Yes," said Coraline. "We'll see you soon, though," said her other father, "when you come back." Said Coraline. "And then we'll all be together as one big happy family," said her other mother. "Forever and always." Coraline backed away. She turned and hurried into the drawing room and pulled open the door in the corner. There was no brick wall there now, just darkness. A night-black underground darkness that seemed as if things in it might be moving. Coraline hesitated. She turned back. Her other mother and her other father were walking towards her, holding hands. They were looking at her with their big black button eyes, or at least she thought they were looking at her. She couldn't be sure. Her other mother reached out her free hand and beckoned gently with one white finger. Her pale lips mouthed, "Come back soon," although she said nothing aloud. Coraline took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness where the strange voices whispered and distant winds howled. She became certain that there was something in the dark behind her, something very old and very slow. Her heart beat so hard and so loudly she was scared it would burst out of her chest. She closed her eyes against the dark. Eventually, she bumped into something and opened her eyes, startled. She had bumped into an armchair in her drawing room. The open doorway behind her was blocked off by rough red bricks. She was home. Chapter 5. Coraline locked the door of the drawing room with the cold black key. She went back into the kitchen and climbed onto a chair. She tried to put the bunch of keys back on top of the door again. She tried 4 or 5 times before she was forced to accept that she just wasn't big enough, and she put them down on the counter next to the door. Her mother still hadn't returned from her shopping expedition. Coraline went to the freezer and took out the spare loaf of frozen bread in the bottom compartment. She made herself some toast with jam and peanut butter. She drank a glass of water. She waited for her parents to come back. But it began to get dark. Coraline microwaved herself a frozen pizza. Then, Coraline watched the television. She wondered why grown-ups gave themselves all the good programs, with all the shouting and running around in. After a while, she started yawning. Then she undressed, brushed her teeth, and put herself to bed. In the morning, she went into her parents' room, but their bed hadn't been slept in, and they weren't around. She ate tinned spaghetti for breakfast. For lunch, she had a block of cooking chocolate and an apple. The apple was yellow and slightly shriveled, but it tasted sweet and good. For tea, she went down to see Mrs. Spink and Forcible. She had 3 digestive biscuits, a glass of limeade, and a cup of weak tea. The limeade was very interesting. It didn't taste anything like limes. It tasted bright green and vaguely chemical. Coraline liked it enormously. She wished they had it at home. "How are your dear mother and father?" asked Miss Spink. "Missing," said Coraline. "I haven't seen either of them since yesterday. I'm on my own. I think that I've become a single-child family." "Tell your mother that we found the Glasgow Empire press clippings we were telling her about. She seemed very interested when Miriam mentioned them to her." "She's vanished under mysterious circumstances," said Coraline. And I believe my father has as well. I'm afraid we'll be out all day tomorrow, Coraline lovey, said Miss Forcible. We'll be staying with April's niece in Royal Tunbridge Wells. They showed Coraline a photographic album with photographs of Miss Spink's niece in it, and then Coraline went home. She opened her money box and walked down to the supermarket. She bought 2 large bottles of limeade, a chocolate cake, and a new bag of apples, and went back home and ate them for dinner. She cleaned her teeth and went into her father's office. She woke up his computer and wrote a story. Coraline's story. There was a girl, her name was Apple. She used to dance a lot. She danced and danced and danced until her feet turned into sausages. The end. She printed out the story and turned off the computer. Then she drew pictures of the little girl dancing underneath the words on the paper. She ran herself a bath with too much bubble bath in it, and the bubbles ran over the side and went all over the floor. She dried herself and then the floor as best as she could. Finally, she went to bed. Coraline woke up in the night. She went into her parents' bedroom, but the bed was made and empty. The glowing green numbers on the digital clock glowed, 3:12 a.m. All alone, in the middle of the night, Coraline began to cry. There was no other sound in the empty flat. She climbed into her parents' bed, and after a while she went back to sleep. Coraline was woken by cold paws batting her face. She opened her eyes. Big green eyes stared back at her. It was the cat. "Hello," said Coraline. "How did you get in?" The cat didn't say anything. Coraline got out of bed. She was wearing a long t-shirt and pajama bottoms. "Have you come to tell me something?" The cat yawned, which made its eyes flash green. "Do you know where Mom and Dad are?" The cat blinked at her slowly. "Is that a yes?" The cat blinked again. Coraline decided that it was indeed a yes. "Will you take me to them?" The cat stared at her. Then it walked out into the hall. She followed. It walked the length of the corridor and stopped down at the very end, where a full-length mirror hung. The mirror had been, a long time before, the inside of a wardrobe door. It had been hanging there on the wall when they moved in, and although Coraline's mother had spoken occasionally of replacing it with something newer, she never had. Coraline turned on the light in the hall. The mirror showed the corridor behind her. That was only to be expected, but also reflected in the mirror were her parents. They stood awkwardly in the reflection of the hall. They seemed sad and alone. As Coraline watched, they waved to her, slowly with limp hands. Coraline's father had his arm around her mother. In the mirror, Coraline's mother and father stared at her. Her father opened his mouth and said something, but she could hear nothing at all. Her mother breathed on the inside of the mirror glass, and quickly, before the fog faded, she wrote, "Help us." With the tip of her forefinger, the fog on the inside of the mirror faded, and so did her parents. And now the mirror reflected only the corridor and Coraline and the cat. "Where are they?" Coraline asked the cat. The cat made no reply, but Coraline could imagine its voice dry as a dead fly on a windowsill in winter, saying, "Well, where do you think they are?" "They aren't going to come back, are they?" said Coraline. "Not under their own steam." The cat blinked at her. Coraline took it as a yes. "Right," said Coraline. "Then I suppose there is only one thing left to do." She walked into her father's study. She sat down at his desk, then she picked up the telephone and opened the phone book and called the local police station. "Police," said a gruff male voice. "Hello," she said. "My name's Coraline Jones." "You're up a bit after your bedtime, aren't you, young lady?" said the policeman. "Possibly," said Coraline, who was not going to be diverted, "but I am ringing to report a crime." "And what sort of crime would that be?" "Kidnapping. Grown-up napping, really. My parents have been stolen away into a world on the other side of the mirror in our hall." "And do you know who stole them?" asked the police officer. Coraline could hear the smile in his voice, and she tried extra hard to sound like an adult. might sound to make him take her more seriously. I think my other mother has them both in her clutches. She may want to keep them and sew their eyes with black buttons, or she may simply have them in there to order to lure me back into reach of her fingers. I'm not sure. Ah, the nefarious clutches of her fiendish fingers, is it? He said. You know what I suggest, Miss Jones? No, said Coraline. What? You ask your mother to make you a big old mug of hot chocolate and then give you a great big old hug. There's nothing like hot chocolate and a hug for making nightmares go away. And if she starts to tell you off for waking her up at this time of night, why, you tell her that that's what the policeman said. He had a deep, reassuring voice. Coraline was not reassured. When I see her, said Coraline, I shall tell her that, and she put down the telephone. The black cat, who had sat on the floor grooming its fur through this entire conversation, now stood up and led the way into the hall. Coraline went back into her bedroom and put on her blue dressing gown and her slippers. She looked under the sink for a torch and found one. But the batteries had long since run down, and it barely glowed with the faintest straw-colored light. She put it down again and found a box of, in case of emergency, white wax candles, and thrust one into a candlestick. She put an apple into each pocket. She picked up the ring of keys and took the old black key off the ring. She walked into the drawing room and looked at the door. She had the feeling that the door was looking back at her, which she knew was silly and knew on a deeper level was somehow true. She went back into her bedroom and rummaged in the pockets of her jeans. She found the stone with the hole in it and put it into her dressing gown pocket. She lit the candle wick with a match and watched it sputter and light, and she picked up the black key. It was cold in her hand. She put the key into the keyhole in the door, but did not turn it. When I was a little girl, said Coraline to the cat, when we lived in our old house a long, long time ago, my dad took me for a walk on the wasteland between our house and the shops. It wasn't the best place to go for a walk, really. There were all these things that people had thrown away back there. Old cookers and broken dishes and dolls with no arms and no legs, and empty cans and broken bottles. Mom and Dad made me promise not to go exploring back there because there were too many sharp things and tetanus and such. But I kept telling them that I wanted to explore it. So one day, my dad put on his big brown boots and his gloves and put my boots on me and my jeans and sweater, and we went for a walk. We must have walked for about 20 minutes. We went down this hill to the bottom of a gully where a stream was, when my dad suddenly said to me, "Coraline, run away, up the hill, now." He said it in a tight sort of way, urgently, so I did. I ran away up the hill. Something hurt me on the back of my arm as I ran, but I kept running. As I got to the top of the hill, I heard somebody thundering up the hill behind me. It was my dad, charging like a rhino. When he reached me, he picked me up in his arms and swept me over the edge of the hill. And then we stopped, and we puffed, and we panted, and we looked back down the gully. The air was alive with yellow wasps. We must have stepped on a wasp's nest in a rotten branch as we walked. And while I was running up the hill, my dad stayed and got stung to give me time to run away. His glasses had fallen off when he ran. I only had the one sting on the back of my arm. He had 39 stings all over him. We counted later in the bath. The black cat began to wash its face and whiskers in a manner that indicated increasing impatience. Coraline reached down and stroked the back of its head and neck. The cat stood up, walked several paces until it was out of her reach, then it sat down and looked up at her again. "So," said Coraline, "later that afternoon my dad went back again to the wasteland to get his glasses back. He said if he left it another day, he wouldn't be able to remember where they'd fallen. As soon as he got home wearing his glasses, he said that he wasn't scared when he was standing there, and the wasps were stinging him and hurting him, and he was watching me run away. because he knew he had to give me enough time to run, or the wasp would have come for the both of us. Coraline turned the key in the door. It turned with a loud clunk. The door swung open. There was no brick wall on the other side of the door, only darkness. A cold wind blew through the passageway. Coraline made no move to walk through the door. And he said that wasn't brave of him doing that, just standing there and being stung, said Coraline to the cat. It wasn't brave because he wasn't scared. It was the only thing he could do. But going back again to get his glasses when he knew the wasps were there, when he was really scared, that was brave. She took her first step down the dark corridor. She could smell dust and damp and mustiness. The cat patted beside her. The cat padded along beside her. And why was that? Asked the cat, although it sounded barely interested. Because, she said, when you're scared but you still do it anyway, that's brave. The candle cast huge, strange, flickering shadows along the wall. She heard something moving in the darkness beside her, or to one side of her, she could not tell. It seemed as if it was keeping pace with her, whatever it was. And that's why you're going back to her world, then, said the cat. Because your father once saved you from wasps. Don't be silly, said Coraline. I'm going back for them because they are my parents, and if they noticed I was gone, I'm sure they would do the same for me. You know you're talking again. How fortunate I am, said the cat, in having a traveling companion of such wisdom and intelligence. Its tone remained sarcastic, but its fur was bristling, and its brush of a tail stuck up in the air. Coraline was going to say something like, sorry, or wasn't it a lot short of her walk last time, when the candle went out as suddenly, as if it had been snuffed by someone's hand. There was a scrabbling and a pattering, and Coraline could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. She put out one hand and felt something wispy, like a spider's web, brush her hands and her face. At the end of the corridor, the electric light went on, blinding after the darkness. A woman stood, silhouetted by the light, a little ahead of Coraline. Coraline, darling, she called. Mum, said Coraline, and she ran forward, eager and relieved. Darling, said the woman, why did you ever run away from me? Coraline was too close to stop, as she felt the other mother's cold arms enfold her. She stood there, rigid and trembling, as the other mother held her tightly. Where are my parents? Coraline asked. We're here, said the other mother, in a voice so close to her real mother's that Coraline could scarcely tell them apart. We're here. We're ready to love you, and play with you, and feed you, and make your life interesting. Coraline pulled back, and the other mother let her go with reluctance. The other father, who had been sitting on a chair in the hallway, stood up and smiled. Come on into the kitchen, he said. I'll make us a midnight snack, and you'll want something to drink. Hot chocolate, perhaps? Coraline walked down the hallway until she reached the mirror at the end. There was nothing reflected in it but a young girl in her dressing gown and slippers, who looked like she had recently been crying, but whose eyes were real eyes, not black buttons, and who was holding tightly to a burned-out candle in a candlestick. She looked at the girl in the mirror, and the girl in the mirror looked back at her. I will be brave, thought Coraline. No, I am brave. She put down the candlestick on the floor, and then she turned around. The other mother and the other father were looking at her hungrily. I don't need a snack, she said. I have an apple. See? And she took the apple from her dressing gown, and then bit into it with relish and an enthusiasm that she did not really feel. The other father looked disappointed. The other mother smiled, showing a full set of teeth, and each of the teeth was a tiny bit too long. The lights in the hallway made her black buttoned eyes glitter and gleam. You don't frighten me, said Coraline, although they did frighten her, very much. I want my parents back. The world seemed to shimmer a little at the edges. Whatever would I have done with your old parents If they have left you, Coraline, it must be because they became bored with you, or tired. Now, I will never become bored with you, and I will never abandon you. You will always be safe here with me." The other mother's wet-looking black hair drifted around her head, like the tentacles of a creature in the deep ocean. "They weren't bored of me," said Coraline. "You're lying. You stole them." "Silly, silly Coraline. They are fine, wherever they are." Coraline simply glared at the other mother. "I'll prove it," said the other mother, and brushed the surface of the mirror with her long, white fingers. It clouded over as if a dragon had breathed on it, and then it cleared again. In the mirror, it was daytime already. Coraline was looking at the hallway, all the way down to her front door. The door opened from the outside, and Coraline's mother and father walked in. They carried suitcases. "That was a fine holiday," said Coraline's father. "How nice it is not to have Coraline anymore," said her mother with a happy smile. "Now we can go do all the things we always wanted to do, like go abroad, but we're prevented from doing so by having a little daughter. And," said her father, "I take great comfort in knowing that her other mother will take better care of her than we ever could." The mirror fogged and faded, and reflected the night once more. "See?" said her other mother. "No," said Coraline, "I don't see, and I don't believe it either." She hoped that what she had just seen was not real, but she was not as certain as she sounded. There was a tiny doubt inside her, like a maggot in an apple core. When she looked up and saw the expression on other mother's face, a flash of real anger which crossed her face like summer lightning, and Coraline was sure in her heart that what she had seen in the mirror was no more than an illusion. Coraline sat down on the sofa and ate her apple. "Please," said her other mother, "don't be difficult." She walked into the drawing room and clapped her hands twice. There was a rustling noise, and a black rat appeared. It stared up at her. "Bring me the key," she said. The rat chittered and then ran through the open door that led back to Coraline's old flat. The rat returned, dragging the key behind it. "Why don't you have your own key on this side?" asked Coraline. "There is only one key, only one door," said the other father. "Hush," said the other mother. "You must not bother our darling Coraline's head with such trivialities." She put the key in the keyhole and twisted the lock. The lock was stiff, but it clunked closed. She dropped the key into her apron pocket. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten to a luminous gray. "If we aren't going to have a midnight snack," said the other mother, "we still need our beauty sleep. I'm going back to bed, Coraline. I would strongly suggest you do the same." She placed her long white fingers on the shoulders of the other father, and she walked him out of the room. Coraline walked over to the door at the far corner of the drawing room. She tugged on it, but it was tightly locked. The door of her other parents' bedroom was now closed. She was indeed tired, but she did not want to sleep in the bedroom. She did not want to sleep under the same roof as her other mother. The front door was not locked. Coraline walked out into the dawn and down the stone steps. She sat down at the bottom step. It was cold. Something furry pushed itself against her side. In one smooth, insinuating motion, Coraline jumped, and then breathed a sigh of relief when she saw what it was. "Oh, it's you," she said to the black cat. "See?" said the cat. "It wasn't so hard recognizing me, was it? Even without names." "Well, what if I wanted to call you?" The cat wrinkled its nose and managed to look unimpressed. "Calling cats," it confided, "tends to be a rather overrated activity. Might as well call a whirlwind." "What if it was dinner time?" asked Coraline. "Wouldn't you want to be called then?" "Of course," said the cat. "But a simple cry of 'dinner' would do nicely. See? No need for names." "Why does she want me?" Coraline asked the cat. "Why does she want me to stay here with her?" "She wants something to love, I think," said the cat. "Something that isn't her." She might want something to eat as well. It's hard to tell with creatures like that. Do you have any advice? Asked Coraline. The cat looked as if it were about to say something else sarcastic. Then it flicked its whiskers and said, "Challenge her. There's no guarantee she'll play fair, but her kind of thing loves games and challenges." "What kind of thing is that?" asked Coraline, but the cat made no answer, simply stretched luxuriantly and walked away. Then it stopped and turned and said, "I'd go inside if I were you. Get some sleep. You have a long day ahead of you." And then the cat was gone. Still, Coraline realized it had a point. She crept back into the silent house, past the closed bedroom door beyond which the other mother and her other father slept. Slept, she wondered? Maybe not. Waited? And then it came to her that should she open the bedroom door, she would find it empty, or more precisely that it was an empty room, and it would remain empty until the exact moment when she opened the door. Somehow that made it easier. Coraline walked into the green and pink parody of her own bedroom. She closed the door and hauled the toy box in front of it. It would not keep anyone out, but the noise someone would make trying to dislodge it would wake her, she hoped. The toys in the toy box were still mostly asleep, and they stirred and muttered as she moved their box, and then they went back to sleep. Coraline checked under her bed, looking for rats, but there was nothing there. She took off her dressing gown and slippers and climbed into bed, and fell asleep with barely enough time to reflect, as she did so, on what the cat could have meant by a challenge. Chapter 6. Coraline was woken by the mid-morning sun full on her face. For a moment she felt utterly dislocated. She did not know where she was. She was not entirely sure who she was. It is astonishing just how much of what we are can be tied to the beds we wake up in the morning. And it is astonishing how fragile that can be. Sometimes Coraline would forget who she was while she was daydreaming, that she was exploring the Arctic, or the Amazon rainforest, or the darkest Africa, and it was not until someone tapped her on the shoulder or said her name that Coraline would come back from a million miles away with a start, and all in a fraction of a second have to remember who she was, and what her name was, and that she was even there at all. Now there was sun on her face, and she was Coraline Jones, yes. And then the green pinkness of the room she was in, and the rustling of a large painted butterfly as it fluttered and beat its way about the ceiling, told her where she had woken up. She climbed out of bed. She could not wear her pajamas, dressing gown and slippers during the day, she decided, even if it meant wearing the other Coraline's clothes. Was there another Coraline? No, she decided there wasn't. There was just her. There were no proper clothes in the cupboard. They were more like dressing-up clothes, or she thought, the kind of clothes she would love to have hanging in her own wardrobe at home. There was a raggedy witch costume, a patched scarecrow costume, a future warrior costume with little digital lights on it that glittered and blinked, a slinky evening dress all covered in feathers and mirrors. Finally, in a drawer she found a pair of black jeans that seemed to be made out of velvet night, and a gray sweater the color of thick smoke, with faint and tiny stars in the fabric which twinkled. She pulled on the jeans and the sweater. Then she put on a pair of bright orange boots she found at the bottom of the cupboard. She took her last apple out of her pocket of her dressing gown, and then, from the same pocket, the stone with the hole in it. She put the stone into the pocket of her jeans, and it was as if her head had cleared a little, as if she had come out of some sort of fog. She went into the kitchen, but it was deserted. Still, she was sure that there was something in the flat, or someone. She walked down the hall until she reached her father's study, and discovered that it was occupied. "Where's the other mother?" she asked the other father. He was sitting in the study at a desk which looked just like her father's, but he was not doing anything at all, not even reading gardening catalogs as her own father did when he was only pretending to be working. "Out," he told her. "Fixing the doors. There are some vermin problems." He seemed pleased to have somebody to talk to. The rats, you mean? No, the rats are our friends. This is the other kind. Big black fellow, with his tail high. The cat, you mean? That's the one, said her other father. He looked less like her true father today. There was something slightly vague about his face, like bread dough that had begun to rise, smoothing out the bumps and cracks and the depressions. Really, I mustn't talk to you when she's not here, he said. But don't you worry. She won't be gone often. I shall demonstrate our tender hospitality to you, such that you will not even think about ever going back. He closed his mouth and folded his hands in his lap. So what am I to do now? Asked Coraline. The other father pointed to his lips. Silence. If you won't even talk to me, said Coraline, I am going exploring. No point, said the other father. There isn't anywhere but here. This is all she made, the house, the grounds, and the people in the house. She made it, and she waited. Then he looked embarrassed and put one finger to his lips again, as if he had just said too much. Coraline walked out of his study. She went into the drawing room, over to the old door, and she pulled it, rattled and shook it. No, it was locked fast, and the other mother had the key. She looked around the room. It was so familiar. That was what made it feel truly strange. Everything was exactly the same as she remembered. There was all her grandmother's strange-smelling furniture. There was the painting of the bowl of fruit. There was the low wooden table with the lion's feet, and the empty fireplace, which seemed to suck heat from the room. But there was something else, something she did not remember seeing. A ball of glass up on the mantelpiece. She went over to the fireplace, went up on her tiptoes, and lifted it down. It was a snow globe with two little people in it. Coraline shook it and set the snow flying, white snow that glittered as it tumbled through the water. Then she put the snow globe back on the mantelpiece and carried on looking for her true parents, and for a way out. She went out of the flat, past the flashing lights, behind which the other Mrs. Spink and Miss Forcible performed their shows forever, and set off into the woods. Where Coraline came from, once you were through the patch of trees, you saw nothing but the meadow and the old tennis court. In this place, the woods went on further, the trees becoming cruder and less tree-like the further you went out. Pretty soon they seemed very approximate, like the idea of trees, a grayish-brown trunk below, a greenish splodge of something that might have been leaves above. Coraline wondered if the other mother wasn't interested in trees, or if she just hadn't bothered with this bit properly because nobody was expected to come out this far. She kept walking, and then the mist began. It was not damp like a normal fog or mist. It was not cold. It was not warm. It felt to Coraline like she was walking into nothing. I'm an explorer, thought Coraline to herself, and I need all the ways out of here that I can get, so I shall keep walking. The world she was walking through was a pale nothingness, like a blank sheet of paper or an enormous, empty white room. It had no temperature and no smell, no texture and no taste. It certainly isn't mist, thought Coraline, although she did not know what it was. For a moment she wondered if she might have gone full blind, but no, she could see herself plain as day. There was no ground beneath her feet, just a misty, milky whiteness. "What do you think you're doing?" said a shape to one side of her. It took a few moments for her eyes to focus on it properly. She thought it might be some kind of lion at first, some distance away from her, and then she thought it might be a mouse close behind her. And then she knew what it was. "I'm exploring," Coraline told the cat. Its fur stood straight out from its body, and its eyes were wide, while its tail was down in between its legs. It did not look like a happy cat. "Bad place," said the cat. "If you want to call it a place, which I don't." "What are you doing here?" "I'm exploring." "Nothing to find here," said the cat. "This is just the outside, the part of the place she hasn't bothered to create." "She?" "The one who says she's your other mother," said the cat. "What is she?" asked Coraline. The cat did not answer, just padded through the pale mist beside Coraline. Something began to appear in front of them, something high and towering and dark. "You were wrong," she told the cat. "There is something there." And then it took shape in the mist, a dark house which loomed at them of the formless whiteness. "But that's," said Coraline. "The house you just left," agreed the cat. "Precisely." "Maybe I just got turned around in the mist," said Coraline. The cat curled the high tip of its tail into a question mark and tipped its head onto one side. "You might have done," it said. "I certainly would not. Wrong indeed. But how can you walk away from something and still come back to it?" "Easy," said the cat. "Think of somebody walking around the world. You start out walking away from something and end up coming back to it." "Small world," said Coraline. "It's big enough for her," said the cat. "Spider webs only have to be large enough to catch flies." Coraline shivered. "He said that she's fixing all the gates and doors," she told the cat, "to keep you out." "She may try," said the cat, unimpressed. "Oh yes, she may try." They were standing under a clump of trees now, beside the house. These trees looked much more likely. "There's ways in and ways out of places like this that even she doesn't know about." "Did she make this place then?" asked Coraline. "Made it, found it. What's the difference?" asked the cat. "Either way, she's had it for a very long time. Hang on." And it gave a shiver and a leap, and before Coraline could blink, the cat was sitting with its paw holding down a big black rat. "It's not that I like rats at the best of times," said the cat, conversationally, as if nothing had happened, "but the rats in this place are all spies for her. She uses them as her eyes and hands." And with that, the cat let the rat go. It ran for almost a meter, and then the cat, with one bound, was upon it, batting it hard with one sharp-clawed paw while holding it down with the other. "I love this bit," said the cat happily. "Want to see me do that again?" "No," said Coraline. "Why do you do it? You're torturing it." Said the cat. It let the rat go. The rat stumbled dazed for a few steps, then it began to run. With a blow of its paw, the cat knocked the rat into the air and caught it with its mouth. "Stop it," said Coraline. The cat dropped the rat between its two front paws. "There are those," it said with a sigh and tones as smooth as oiled silk, "who have suggested that the tendency of a cat to play with its prey is a merciful one. After all, it permits the occasional funny little running snack to escape from time to time. How often does your dinner get to escape?" And then it picked the rat up in its mouth and carried it off into the woods behind a tree. Coraline walked back into the house. All was quiet and empty and deserted. Even her footsteps on the carpeted floor seemed loud. Dust motes hung in a beam of sunlight. At the far end of the hall was the mirror. She looked, and she could see herself walking towards it, looking reflected, a little braver than she actually felt. There was nothing else there in the mirror, just her in the corridor. A hand touched her shoulder, and she looked up. The other mother stared down at Coraline with big black button eyes. "Coraline, my darling," she said, "I thought we could play some games together this morning now that you're back from your walk. Hopscotch? Monopoly? Happy families?" "You weren't in the mirror," said Coraline. The other mother smiled. "Mirrors," she said, "are never to be trusted. Now, what game shall we play?" Coraline shook her head. "I don't want to play with you. I want to go home and be with my real parents. I want you to let them go, to let us all go." The other mother shook her head very slowly. "Sharper than a serpent's tooth," she said, "is a daughter's ingratitude. Still, the proudest spirit can be broken with love." And her long white fingers waggled and caressed the air. "I have no plans to love you," said Coraline. "No matter what, you can't make me love you." "Let's talk about it," said the other mother. and she turned and walked into the sitting room. Coraline followed her. The other mother sat down on the big sofa. She picked up a brown handbag from beside the sofa and took out a white rustling paper bag from the inside. She extended the hand with the paper bag in it to Coraline. "Would you like one?" she asked politely. Expecting it to be a toffee or a butterscotch ball, Coraline looked down. The bag was half filled with large, shiny, black beetles, crawling over each other in their efforts to get out of the bag. "No," said Coraline, "I don't want one." "Suit yourself," said the other mother. She carefully picked out a particularly large black beetle, pulled off its legs, which she dropped neatly into a big glass ashtray on the small table beside the sofa, and popped the beetle into her mouth. She crunched it happily. "Yum," she said, and took another. "You're sick," said Coraline. "Sick and evil and weird." "Is that any way to talk to your mother?" her other mother asked, with her mouth full of black beetles. "You aren't my mother," said Coraline. Her other mother ignored this. "Now I think you are a little overexcited, Coraline. Perhaps this afternoon we could do a little embroidery together, or some watercolor painting, then dinner, and then if you have been good, you may play with the rats a little before bed, and I shall read you a story and tuck you in and kiss you good night." Her long white fingers fluttered gently like a tired butterfly, and Coraline shivered. "No," said Coraline. The other mother sat on the sofa. Her mouth was set in a line. Her lips were pursed. She popped another black beetle into her mouth, and then another, like someone with a bag of chocolate-covered raisins. Her big black button eyes looked into Coraline's hazel eyes. Her shiny black hair twined and twisted about her neck and shoulders as if it were blowing in some wind that Coraline could not touch or feel. They stared at each other for over a minute. Then the other mother said, "Manners." She folded the white paper bag carefully so no black beetles could escape, and she placed it back in the shopping bag. Then she stood up, and up, and up. She seemed taller than Coraline remembered. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out first the black door key, which she frowned at and tossed into her handbag, then a shiny silver-colored key. She held it up triumphantly. "There we are," she said. "This is for you, Coraline, for your own good, because I love you, to teach you manners. Manners maketh man, after all." She pulled Coraline back into the hallway and advanced upon the mirror at the end of the hall. Then she pushed the tiny key into the fabric of the mirror and twisted it. The mirror opened like a door, revealing a dark space behind it. "You may come out when you've learned some manners," said the other mother, "and when you're ready to be a loving daughter." She picked Coraline up and pushed her into the dim space behind the mirror. A fragment of beetle was sticking to her lower lip, and there was no expression at all in her black button eyes. Then she swung the mirror door closed and left Coraline in the darkness. Thanks for listening, everybody. The new episode should be out a lot sooner than the gap between the first and the second. I've got this channel going. I've got my work ethic is coming back. And I actually think the book is getting a lot better. I was a little, I don't know, when reading the first couple chapters, I kind of thought maybe this isn't as good as I remember. But the more I read, the more I remember just exactly why I enjoyed it so much as a young buck. But yeah, so see you guys soon. Sorry about that. The line in the last chapter, I don't know if you caught it. I read it and I was like, that's odd. I don't know what he meant by that, but if you know, you know. And yeah, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.